Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And it's our last week of March. We read A Fate and Fire by Amanda Bouchet.
This is really fun and short. So I know we still split it up into three parts, but you could read it in an afternoon. It's so much
Yes,
fun.
it's so good. So we pick up with Sophie and Pierce checking out the Met and MoMA to see if any of the ancient like sculptures or artifacts or anything like strike anything on the shard, like make it glow more or anything. Like,
Figure out like how they're supposed to get the shard to Athena. Like it's I don't know if Sophie has told Pierce this, but she's like, I definitely can't be buying plane tickets to Athens. But they do know that there are like
Greek
portrayal.
artifacts.
There's art. Some of it is ancient, some of it is like more modern, like representations of the gods or whatever. So
Mhm.
they're trying to figure out if maybe if they can like get the shard to one of those things, if it would like do anything. So
Sadly, they pretty much strike out after walking around the museums. And they're walking
Sophie
back.
has made the like she kind of fashioned a bracelet to hold so that she's not walking around with this shard.
Ice
Um,
shard that never melts.
but she's still people who shouldn't have notice.
Yes.
So whether
Um, yeah, and also they're not supposed to be touching things. Like there's like ropes around sculpture and stuff, and they're like, touching it and they're like getting in trouble. So
yeah,
they leave the museum, they're walking through the park, and Mr. Novalight steps into their path. Um, with some more henchmen this time.
he
He
comes himself, which is a
Yeah.
little bit of a surprise.
Yes.
Pierce is kind of like, this guy. It's funny the way he's kind of like, I'm not fooled. He's got some muscle under there, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Not enough to probably like break someone's arm by squeezing it and then throw them away with it, but who knows?
Yeah. He's like, I'm not. He is immediately trying to figure out like he is not um intimidated by being outnumbered, like a few
Yeah.
people to one, but he does still have that bullet wound and he is still, like
And
there's
he
stuff.
assumes that they might have guns, which he obviously does not have, and that is problematic too.
Yeah.
So Novalight threatens Sophie and threatens her family. He makes it clear he's already been in proximity to her family, and she is very freaked out by this. Um, and Pierce kind of takes this moment as Novalight's talking to Sophie and like jumps on him and like knocks him
Does
down.
before he jumps on him though, he does like kind of whisper to Sophie at one point, like if if you want to try magics, like this would be a good time
Right. Like try to
to
call
figure
up
it
your
out.
power.
And she's too freaked out, I think, to even like
Yeah.
do anything in that direction.
Yeah.
But he's convinced that she had some sort of magic.
Yes.
And he's kind of like, this would be
This would be a great time. Yeah. So he jumps on him, he knocks him down, but the goons kind of grab Sophie at the same time. And that's when her magic shows up when she needs it, obviously. And lightning comes out of her hands and she like electrocutes these guys basically.
entire cell. Like she like lights up and they fall out of her, and then other people run to her, and we're getting this from his point of view,
Yes.
but he's like, she's clearly like, stop. But when she does it, like lightning comes
Lightning
out
comes out of her
and
hands.
zaps them.
And she's horrified, but they're free. So they run. She's afraid that she's killed all these guys, but Pierce knows that she hasn't. Um, which he's glad for her, but that also means that this is clearly not over. Like these people are still alive, they're going to keep coming after them. And they run all the way back
It's
to the
interesting
hotel.
because he grabs her hand and it's still warm from like it's still hot
Yeah,
from what she just did, and she's just like
totally freaked
horrified.
out. Which I mean, who wouldn't be? No magic your whole life and all of a sudden you like electrocute five people? Like that would be pretty
I don't
scary.
know. Some people might be excited, but
I mean, yeah.
she was
She is
like,
not one of them, that's for sure.
she's like, I killed people. I
Yeah.
don't like
I'm a
this.
murderer. I'm gonna go to jail. Like she's very freaked out. So, back at the hotel, Pierce is telling Sophie her lightning means that she's a direct bloodline to Zeus. Only Zeus's bloodline has lightning, and Kat, his sister-in-law, is another one that has it. Um, and she wants to get rid of the shard as soon as possible. She's like even more freaked out now. She's like, this world has enough problems. Like, magic cannot be one of them. Like, this world does not need magic. And
She's like, we've made enough, like, we've made real bad things without magic. Like, we don't need. And when
yeah,
they had their conversation with Novalight, like, it was very clear that I mean, he is kind of like a Bond villain and that he was like clearly like, ooh, I will have powers. And
yes,
but like his intentions were to find out, like, he knows this thing is special.
yeah,
He's trying to figure out like how he can use it.
yeah.
Um, and as soon as he sees that it's glowing in proximity to Kat, he's smart enough to like put two and two together. And he's
And
like, wait a
Pierce kind of
minute.
sees this happen. Like he's like, "Oh, this guy's no dummy. Like he's clearly figured out that Sophie is important to this shard to making it work."
Yeah. So
Um,
he's kind of like either the guy who stole it from me, either knew something about the shard that I don't know about, or something about you. And Pierce is like, oh no, it's like that's
that's
like
yeah, that was like the catalyst for him like jumping him. So, the TV's like on in the background and a video comes up of the Statue of Liberty on the TV and Pierce,
imagine, honestly, I imagine like some kind of like insurance commercial or something.
yeah,
But Pierce is like riveted. He's
he
like,
he's like, "What is that?" And she tells him like what it is. And he says something which is like the Greek, version of that basically. And then he loses his shit completely. He freaks out. He locks himself in the bathroom. He like breaks the glass shower doors. Like it's a mess. And you're realizing, uh-oh,
just hearing like a commotion, and she is like, please stop, Bolt. I cannot pay
I
for
have to pay
this.
for this.
He does stop.
Yes, and he clearly remembers what he has forgotten.
He's so
And
distraught that she's kind of like, when he opens the door, she's like, I should and would be mad, but he looks so upset that she
so
just
upset.
ends up trying to console him and figure out what happened.
And here's where I went back and reread the first few chapters of Heart of Fire again because I had kind of forgotten exactly what he did to get himself into this situation. So what he did, as he explains to Sophie, is he called upon Ares to get rid of Kat, thinking that Kat was the instigator of all the war and everything that was going on and getting his family in danger. But P.S., it's actually his brother Griffin, her husband. He is the instigator of all this. Kat is the one that has the powers that can make it happen, but Griffin is the one pushing her towards her destiny, basically. And he didn't really understand that like he needed to at the time.
Also, I mean, he's a scholar, but in his world, like, that's not that important because they're
Right.
warring at all
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And so he also didn't understand that like getting rid of someone was not the reason to call a god.
Yeah.
He was like, I can do this ritual, call a god, and then I can get rid of her. But he didn't realize that that wasn't the thing. It was a side effect. It was like a punishment for
Right.
having used that for calling the
Not
god.
to
Is
call
that
them to get rid of someone. That's like not what it's for. And also,
so?
he didn't realize he wouldn't get to decide who they
Who was
take.
gonna?
And they have big plans for Kat and have had put people in places all over the place to make sure that these plans come to fruition and so they can't take her.
And
Plus
by
she's
they meaning
pregnant.
the gods, right? Like the
Right, the
gods are
gods, yeah.
invested
The
in
gods
Cat,
can't take her.
and
And
so they weren't gonna take Cat. They were gonna
right.
take
And it
someone
turns out
else that
she's
he
pregnant and Ares makes it clear one soul, which means he can't take her because
too.
it's two. Um, and then he couldn't let them take his little sister Kaya. And so, of course, he offered himself at that point, and that is how he ended up here. Athena showed up and was like, I could really use him, you know, in my world. Like things are going a little crazy, like he might be helpful. And they agree that that's where he'll go. Um, And in that moment, he could see on Kat's face that she forgave him, but he's like, Griffin doesn't, and he won't. Like, I put his wife and his baby at risk. Like, he's never going to forgive me. And he's very regretful of that, what he did, and all that he didn't understand until it was too late. And now he can never make it right. Like, the only way he could make it right was doing what he did, which was sacrificing himself in the end, even though the whole mess was of his own making anyway. Um, and so the good news
You
is,
could see why he's so upset because
right,
first of all, he realizes that that he hurt his family and she's trying to tell him like no, like you probably didn't, and he's like no, no, I fully hurt my family and I did it on purpose, and I like he didn't know what he was doing, but his intention was to like rip
get rid of her.
his brother's like mate away from
Yes,
him, and
exactly.
that's
So the good news is he still knows the summoning chant and he knows he can bring Athena to them right now. But the bad news is call a god, lose a soul, which is what he figured out from doing it the first time. And he's like, will it be me again? Or will it be Sophie? Like, will they even let me volunteer myself again this time? And of course, Sophie is horrified at the idea of them losing each other. And Piers is kind of maybe lying to himself, hoping that if she's not in proximity to the situation, that she won't be like up for grabs. Like, even though he cares about her, if she's not there,
he
maybe.
says like she's the only thing he cares about in this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So like there's not if the lose a soul portion of the program is to be a punishment, that's the only choice is her. So he's just like, we can't be
Unless they
together, which
allow
is so
him to
sad.
like volunteer himself again, which would still like separate him from her, which would be bad for him
He's
too.
not happy about this situation
Yes.
either.
And so he's like, you need to be far away when I do this. He's like, it'll take you 3 hours to drive home. So I'll wait that long and then I will like start the
Like, it's
chant.
Christmas Eve and you like to spend this time with your family. You told me this was important to you. She's like, what are you talking about?
Right. Like
Like,
none of that matters right now. Yeah.
no.
She doesn't want to go, but she'll leave her phone with him so that he can call her if things work out and she needs to come back for him. And so um basically we jump to Pierce is waiting for Novalight to show up at the hotel. He has called him through much rigmarole through the answering service at his office and stuff and being like, no, really, he wants to talk to me
How
to get this
annoying
billionaire on the
is it
phone.
trying to get a hold of somebody
Yeah. And
up the
so he's
corporate ladder?
coming to the hotel, which is all part of Pierce's plan. Um, and they had sex before she
I
left
would
and
want to say that it's pretty interesting that he like from watching television, I guess, has
yeah,
figured out, like watching the 6 o'clock news, especially, but just television, he's like, killing people in this world is not the same as in my world.
yeah,
And there are like restrictions and people get in trouble for this. So he has like gone out of his way to make sure that Sophie is not implicated because he's
yes.
like, either Athena's taking, like, as long as this dude is alive, Sophie and her family are in danger. So his plan is like either he gets taken away or he's gonna like
Or I'm
slice him
gonna
in
kill
half
him.
before he gets taken away.
And
So
he
he's
made
like, when they
sure that
find a
like
body
everyone
in this
saw
room,
Sophie leaving the hotel and like he specifically asked like the doorman about like Rockefeller Center or something to like so he would remember that Sophie left or whatever to try to keep her like out of this.
yeah, and he like specifically told them like she's leaving, but I will be staying one more night. Like
Right.
he's
And meanwhile, he's thinking about right before she left, they had sex and she stopped him from using a condom. Um, and he thinks they both kind of wanted maybe that
piece of him
chance
to
for
stay.
something to happen.
Which like
But
breaks his heart, but also he's I don't know, he's kind of like, I wouldn't want to leave her if she's pregnant, but also like I don't know.
also she's a
It's
badass and she can handle everything, which we've already figured out like from what she's been through this week. And so he starts the chant to call for Athena after they call his room and say the man's there to see him. And he's like, okay, send him up. And so he's
calculated that it's going to take enough minutes that hopefully by the time he shows up, like the ritual will be.
yes, we'll be completing. And so he calls for Athena. She comes, he gives her the shard, and she like almost like puts it into her own chest. Like it just like passes through her body basically for like safekeeping.
Like soaks it up
Yeah.
and then it
And
like makes her a little shiny and then there she is.
yeah, and so that part is mission complete, which is good. And then Novalight knocks on the door and Pierce lets him in and he offers
Turns
Novalight as the
around
one
and
to take.
Athena's dressed up like just a 30s lady from New York. And so he's like, what? You're not Sophie. What is this?
Yeah, and he's very confused. And at first Pierce is like, "Oh wow, she changed herself." Because there is a point in the Heart on Fire where it talks about how they look basically human and then all of a sudden they don't, and it's like they let go of whatever like mirage thing like they've been keeping under wraps.
Good
And
glamour.
this is like when she first appears to him and takes the shard, she looks like a god, but when Novalight gets there she basically just looks like a lady, and he's like, okay, so we're doing this again, that's fine. And so Athena says, unfortunately for Pierce's plan, that the Fates have plans for Novalight and she can't take him. He has to procreate on this
Novella
planet.
says something to her, and she is like, because he's kind of like, give me my thing, and like I like kind of like I'm in charge here, and she's like, she
Oh, honey.
responds in a way that Pierce is like, oh, maybe she can't fit in here. Like she's so like sharp, and like
Yeah.
her grin is like in a
Like
way that he's
not
just like,
quite
oh
right.
no. He's like, she looks like a killer. Like
Yeah,
clearly she might not blend in as easy as I
right,
think.
for sure. And so unfortunately this man has to procreate. His children, there's plans for his children, and so he can't be the one to be taken. But at that point, when Athena and Pierce are kind of getting distracted talking, Novalite tries to get the drop on Pierce, who breaks his nose with the butt of his sword, which is well deserved. And then Sophie bursts into the room, and Pierce says,
It's like,
"No," and Athena says, "Yes." And it was very funny. And so he's basically knocked uh Novalite out. And Athena is like, ugh, now I have to fix all this. Like, look what you did to the bathroom. My God, man, like get it together, right? And so she's like, she pulls out a wand and she says like bippity boppity boop. And she's like, oh, I've always wanted to say that. And she's like, well, at least for the last 70 or so years, which was really funny. And so she
it
like
was cute.
Novalite disappears. And they're like, okay, so what happened? So she sent him away with no memory of this event or the shard even itself. And like, he's just going to move on with his life. It never even happened.
He is gonna wake up with no memory of any of these past couple days, but also she explains that like his archaeological site is gonna like be a bust. Like everything's gonna be he's gonna like sell his interest in that area of the
Right.
world. Everything's gonna like
Move away
steer
from
him
there.
away from that.
Yeah. And then Athena says she can't change the fact that Pierce is exiled, which he wouldn't really want to change at this point anyway because of Sophie. But she does give him like some forms of ID, a university diploma, and the deed to a successful auction house that restores and appraises artifacts. And she's like,
And
you're,
she set up a whole backstory for him, and she's
yeah,
like, "You're very well regarded." And I'm like,
right. Like
"How?"
people call
Because
you to answer questions about artifacts all the time. Like, yeah, and it's she clearly just, that's she's a goddess. And so now he can stay with Sophie and they can live happily ever after. So we get to the epilogue.
sweet to me, but also like I guess up until this point, it's there is a moment where he's like, even if I could go back home, like Sophie is my home now. Like
Yeah.
it would never be he understands Griffin and the way that he is with Kat. There's so much that like becomes clear to him,
Hmm.
even about his like the relationships of the people around him and like why his brother like the way his brothers responded to he's like, oh, I'm not any different than them. Like I guess he thought
Yep.
that they were just like dramatic, but now he's like,
Right.
actually,
Actually, I
me
get it
too.
now. Yeah. For sure.
It's
So
really
it's
sweet to
for
see that.
it was nice. And I think anybody who read the original series and all the problems that you might have had with his character, like you understand him better also.
Well,
Um,
I did think it was interesting that even in the very beginning of this book, um, Sophie says something to him and she's like teasing, and he's like, "Are you making fun of me?" And she says like, "No, I mean maybe, but it's like in good fun." She's like, "I come from
right.
a big family. This is how we," and it makes him like he like has a pang, has a
Yeah.
feeling about it. And so it does, it's interesting because it's such a short story, like the
Yeah.
novella is short. But you do get the sense that like he will have the things that he needs if he stays,
Yeah.
which is nice
It
because when
is
that's the
nice.
resolution, you're at least like okay with it.
Yeah. So the epilogue is 4 years later. They have two golden retrievers named Met and MoMA, and they have two little girls, Athena and Zoe. Um, and his life is pretty perfect as far as he's concerned. He does regret that he'll never be able to make things right with Griffin, and Kat, or see the rest of his family again, but he can't really regret everything that happened because he loves his life and he loves Sophie and he wouldn't change it. Um,
Yeah, and like he was kind of mismatched for the role he had in that world. Like even when
yeah,
you even though we didn't get his point of view in the Kingmaker Chronicles books, it was clear that like he was a warrior, but like that wasn't what
that wasn't
he
what he wanted.
want. Like it wasn't,
Yeah,
yeah, it was like it wasn't well, he wasn't well suited for that role anyway.
yeah.
So it does feel like he's like
This is the
happy
life he
in
was
his life
supposed to
now.
have. Yeah. So he tells the kids, they tell the kids, stories about Greek mythology, but he also peppers in like stories about his family, kind of in the same way as if they're like, ancient people from the past, their ancestors or whatever, which I thought was cute. And then Sophie's mom and sister arrive to bake the holiday loaf again. And the rest of her family will be over later, and it's chaos, and he loves it, and he's definitely where he's meant to be. And
Yeah, it's the end.
oh, so
So
good.
this was really fun. And like, yeah, it was. Sorry, that is dog. Her name is Freya.
Hello,
Friends.
Freya.
Bye bye. She's waited long enough, apparently.
Yes. Okay. So everybody, next week we will be talking to Amanda Bouchet about this story, and we'll see you then.
And